This is Amanda Rocco. I am an 8th grade social studies teacher at Indian Land Middle School in Lancaster County. We live in the upstate of South Carolina. In this video, I am having conversations with 3 colleagues from the Lancaster County School District who have kindly shared their Gullah Geechee culture and heritage with me after I was a participant in the National Endowment for the Humanities Landmarks Workshop, The Legacy of Early African American and Gullah Geechee History in Savannah, Georgia in July 2024. Going to be sharing some of her culture and history and about her community with us today. So thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
First of all, I wanted to start with, where is your family from and where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a small town in Hampton County called Varnville. Varnville is a very, very small town. Now my area is known for the Murdoch situation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But
Interesting.
But it's a small town. That's how we got on the map. And our watermelon festival that we have every year. I think it's year 82 or something now.
Wow.
So it's been going on for a long time.
To be Gullah Geechee.
To be Gullah Geechee, to me, like where I'm from, some people will probably say we got it because we're on the coast, but we're not like on the coast. But to be Gullah Geechee, to me, it stands for our heritage. We learn how to survive, whether we are like with the storm that just happened, whether lights are on. If you're from the Gullah Geechee area, you're gonna survive regardless if you have water or not, if you have lights or not. That was just something that was embedded into us. So a lot of times that we still go with remedies. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to have the manufacturer stuff. We can go out in the field and pick something that's gonna help us heal, mm-hmm. or pick something that's what we can eat. Mm-hmm. So that's Gullah Geechee for me. Just knowing that we stay true to ourselves and our upbringing.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the remedies that you have used personally?
So one thing is we use moss that grows in trees, and now a lot of people love sea moss for mm-hmm. Different things. But I can remember growing up, they would take moss and put in your shoe if you had headaches.
Okay.
Also, like when we sprain our ankles or anything, we would take clay, vinegar, and that would be your cast. They'll wrap your leg or wherever you sprain with clay and vinegar and water. So that was another thing. Different herbs we would get out from out the woods and stuff and come back and boil it, and you would drink it. If a child was born with a hernia, mm-hmm. so that what we call like the big navel, mm-hmm. you would take a 50-cent piece, put it on there to let it go shrink down. If you had a cold or something, a real bad cold during like flu season, they take like fat back and put it around your neck, or 9 pins and put it around your neck. So there's a lot of different remedies that we use.
I'm not familiar with the pins that you just mentioned. Can you
like safety pins. So you would take
okay.
take safety pins and put it
mm-hmm.
around the child's neck, like for asthma and different colds and stuff. Yeah.
Is your culture similar or different from other parts of Black or African American culture in America?
So our culture is more so like West Africa mm-hmm. and Jamaica. They resonated there. They came, the West Africans and stuff. So a lot of our beliefs and traditions is from those cultures. Per se, like around here, we're not like any other, mm-hmm. But like the West Africans and the Jamaicans, yeah.
Okay. And then if you don't mind us going back in the history a little bit, why were some of the people from West Africa? Why did they come? Why were they forced to come here? Was that something to do with like what was going on in that region where your family lived at the time?
Well, it was before my time, mm-hmm. but what I learned is like they came here, so that's why we got like the indigo. They came mm-hmm. from rice, mm-hmm. So Gullah's a lot with rice and indigo and stuff like that. So they came and started like fields of indigo, fields of rice and stuff. So they resonated here. They came from their country and resonated here to make a new life and mm-hmm. start a new life. And so that's the culture that we go with,
And South Carolina made so much money as a colony and as an early state off of the skills that your ancestors brought.
and the Lowcountry is known for, we're gonna have rice with almost every meal. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that came from the skills that
Right.
your ancestors
Right.
and ancestors.
Hey, I see the sign. Hey, I see the sign. Hey, Lord, time gone, time gone. Too tall angel. Hey, tall angel. Hey, tall angel. Hey, Lord, time gone. On the chariot wheel. Hey, on the chariot wheel. Hey, on the chariot wheel. Hey, Lord, time gone. Talking about judgment. Hey, talking about judgment. Hey, talking about judgment. Hey, Lord, time gone. Oh, look over yonder. Time gone. Too tall angel. Hey, tall angel. Hey, tall angel. Hey, Lord, time gone. On the chariot wheel. Hey, on the chariot wheel. Hey.
Does your family still live on the land that you grew up on? And have there been any struggles to maintain ownership of your family's land over the years?
So it's like nowadays it would probably be hard for certain people to own ownership if they're not like they weren't taught like going from generation to generation. Thank God my family is fortunate to still have the land that my grandparents, my great grandparents owned. I have a cousin that lives on our land right now. And before my last uncle passed away, he made sure that we knew that this land is for family. So if anytime somebody fell short or anytime somebody, like I have family all over. So if you need to come back home, home is where we are. So you can always come back and, pick up again. So
That's beautiful.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing. What are some of the traditions that you have worked to keep and maintain in your life and with your family and with your children here in the upstate? What are some of the things that have been important to you to maintain as you move to a new community?
So respect is the first, and love. If we don't have anything else, if we don't have money in our pocket, I try to teach my kids that you always show respect and you always give love, because that's going to carry you when money can't. So that was something that I was always taught. Also, our traditions is like every time my kids get sick, we're not going to run to the doctor. We're not going to use the medication. Then we're going to try our home remedies first, and when that don't work, then we'll go to the doctor. Also, just the way we eat. I mean, it's a lot of times that I come across people like we love seafood in the Lowcountry. So up here in upstate, a lot of people are not used to seafood, so they be like, I don't want that, but we can have seafood every day, Also, we in the Lowcountry wasn't raised on like upstate. We raised on pinto beans a lot, and we're raised on like butter beans, lima beans, speckle beans, field peas, all those kind of things. And so when I even moved up here, I was like, "It's a pinto bean," because I wasn't used to that. But that goes to show like we could still be in South Carolina, and the lower part we have different traditions in the upstate. Yeah.
And what would you like us to know about your culture? What would you like us to take away from our conversation for anyone who gets an opportunity to listen to you today?
The main thing is respect. You respect each other. That's the main thing. Like we were always taught no ma'am, yes ma'am. Like it took a village, and like I still raise my kids on it takes a village. My cousins, like my first cousins, is not known as first cousins to them. They know that they are cousins, but we go by uncles and aunts because they're my cousins. So my kids call my first cousins uncles and aunts. It's just a respect thing, and it's our village because we know that if anything happened to me today, my kids got somebody to look out for them. So the first thing is respect and love. And I mean, we were taught to land was everything. So like how you asked earlier about do we still have our family, and we do. So in the Lowcountry, they teach us like you want land. Like a lot of people from the city may not understand that, but to us, like we will buy a house, you got to have some acreage, So yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like us to know about you and your community that we haven't addressed yet?
I think a lot of people think that when you're, from the Gullah area, Geechee Gullah, they feel like you are less than because we don't speak to them correct English. It's all broken English. We shorten a lot of stuff. But that's just who we are, You can go to Africa and they speak French, Swahili, whatever. Just like up north have their dialect, we have ours. It don't make us any different. But I guess if you find somebody that's Geechee or Gullah, I believe that you will love them. You will fall in love because we only know love, love and respect and work ethics. So we're taught that young. You will see kids probably still that grandparents still have fields and farm stuff and animals. You see kids, little kids out working. So yeah, you see a lot of gardens in the Lowcountry. They kind of raise their own food. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your wonderful heritage with us. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you, Coach.
But I wanted to know a little bit about what you and your family, so what traditions do you maintain in your life here in the upcountry that are important to you to maintain and continue with your family, even though you're outside of the Lowcountry?
One of the things that we laugh about all the time is rice. I don't know if anybody else mentioned that, but
Yes.
rice. That's a big staple in the Lowcountry. And to be honest, I'm gonna be honest, when I was growing up and my mom would buy the big croaker sack of rice, like the white bag, and then she'd pour it over into a 5-gallon bucket. I was like, why do we need so much rice? But to be honest, it wasn't until I got a little older that I understood this is why rice was a staple for us. So like rice and beans, my son will tell you, I will eat beans constantly because of course that was a staple. That's what was harvested, there. And you really don't understand until you get older, why do we still like these things so much? But that's part of the heritage. Now I'm gonna be honest, a lot of people, when I went to Winthrop, so a lot of people would say, you don't sound like you're from the Low Country. And I tell them, I guess I really don't, because when I was there, they would stress to us the importance of um, enunciation, pronunciation. But I will say this, when I get back around my people in the Low Country, you'll hear certain colloquialisms come out and different things like that. But I still hold on to a lot of the cooking traditions, that we have. The faith is very strong. Yeah, that's a big thing. Faith and just the closeness of family, the importance of, passing on things down and creating something for your family behind you. Because we know family was very important in the close knit of the culture and passing along and making.
I wanted to ask if there's been any traditions that you have seen like struggle to survive within your lifetime, and things that maybe um, were harder to hold on to. Is there anything that you've seen that
So
you?
for me,
Yeah.
I've never, so I was born in New Orleans and then we moved here. So I got, a mixture of both Gullah Geechee there and then here, the way South Carolina and then Louisiana, it's like, so one of the things that I do see is a struggle, just one of the traditions of the sweetgrass baskets. I think they talked about that. Well, I'm sure they probably talked about that, but just the fact of it's not many people that are still practicing. So I think that's one of the ones that I see that may be dying out a little bit, but in certain areas it still sticks. Because like in Beaufort, on the island and stuff, and I'm not sure if Mr. Bird mentioned it, but I'm sure over there on the islands, a lot of them still do it because you would see a lot of people on the side of the road. You see it in Charleston in the marketplace, people working there. But it's not as lucrative, as it has been prior. But we would see a bunch of the little baskets around my aunt's house. They would have sweetgrass fans that they used in church, those type things. But I don't see that being something that's carried along. And then the folklore, that's another thing. If you don't tell the stories, you
Mhm.
lose the stories. And so a lot of the kids, they don't know the stories, So it's like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Are there any specific stories that were special to you as a child that um, were meaningful within?
So one of the things in the Gullah Geechee culture, specifically in the area of like Beaufort and all of that, they would talk about Dr. Buzzard.
Oh. Chapter 19 of God, Dr. Buzzard, and the Bolito Man by Cornelia Walker Bailey. We'd go to church, we'd shake hands, and we'd sing spirituals when I was growing up. But we believed in God, Dr. Buzzard, and the Bolito Man. I've told you about our belief in God and in the Bolito Man already, and now it's time to tell you about Dr. Buzzard. Let's say I tried the church and that didn't work. I'm still angry, so I need to do something a little more drastic. I'll try Dr. Buzzard. And in come Dr. Buzzard. Dr. Buzzard was the root doctor, the conjurer, the worker of black magic. He could put a spell on you and do you bodily harm. He could lift a spell off you. He could even turn a spell around and throw it back on the one that put it on you to begin with. Some places people call that voodoo or hoodoo, but over here we mostly say root or mojo to refer to the mysterious roots and herbs Dr. Buzzard used. No one was safe from root, absolutely no one, and the old people had a hard time believing in natural illness. It was hard for them to take the word of a doctor about anything, even if someone persuaded them and said, "Take them to the doctor, take them to the doctor." If the doctor didn't find an instant cure, then the illness was blamed on something different, entirely different. Root. Somebody fixed somebody. If people suspect someone of doing some evil thing to them, they get weary. I'm thinking of one man over here in his 80s who believed that someone tried to put root on him once. It happened 40 years ago. But from that day on, he always had been on the watch for anything that's not normal, and he will not eat any food he didn't cook himself because you might put something in it and do him harm. He was sick with pneumonia in the hospital once, and the whole time he was there, he refused to eat. He didn't know those cooks. Those cooks didn't have no reason to do him harm, but he didn't trust them. The doctor had to let him go early because he would not eat. He went and stayed at his niece's house in Brunswick then, his own niece now, and he would not eat anything from her either. It's that deep seated in him. When I was growing up, I was completely surrounded by people who believed in root. Everybody over here believed, and I especially believed because Grandpa was known for doing some root. Now, Grandpa was a religious person. He prayed to God and he read his Bible every day, but he fit into the category of believing in God, Dr. Buzzard, and the Bolito Man. See, the old people didn't put their faith in God alone. God has his place, but so did Dr. Buzzard, and so did the Bolito Man. It was almost like they didn't believe in one form of the supernatural any more than they did the others. It was like they said, I'm going to pray to God, but God takes his time to answer, so I'm also going to consult Dr. Buzzard and use his magic potion, which will bring me faster results. I can also see some of the old people thinking, maybe God intends for me to use this magic potion anyway. He granted me that knowledge, so it must be okay. Because they knew, and the good Lord above knew too, that they needed some extra luck. Grandpa dealt in white root mostly. Like if a man came and said, "Can you help me with something so I can get a job? I'm down on my luck." And he would give him something for good fortune. If a woman came and said, "I got a sore foot that's bothering me. Will you help me?" Grandpa would give her a root to ward away illness. It was just like it was with the amulets he handed out. He did the kinds of things that give people hope and bettered their lives, so he was well regarded. Some of his roots grew on the island. He got other roots and powders mail order from an outfit in Chicago and one in Atlanta. I know he got his High John the Conqueror root and Little John by mail. These two roots were pretty popular because they're for love problems. High John is the bigger and the more potent of the two. Some people say that Grandpa helped them turn root back onto somebody they suspected of doing evil to them. He may have reversed the root if he figured there was no rightful reason for that evil spell to have been cast to begin with. But I don't think he made a practice of it. I have a suspicion that Grandpa could have even conjured up the initial spell, the evil one himself, if he wanted to. He did have a mean streak in him, but he never did anything that I could see, and Mamma never said a word about her papa, So all I know is that he was known mostly for good root. The knowledge of root came to Sapelo and all the sea islands with our ancestors. In Africa, voodoo, juju was an evil spirit, and wanga was a charm. The first Dr. Buzzard in the Sea Islands got off the boat and began practicing root in St. Helena, South Carolina. He was said to be as powerful as a buzzard and to have the patience of a buzzard, and that's how he got his name. Ever since then, root workers in the Sea Islands have been known as Dr. Buzzard, and it always has been said that the ones in South Carolina have the strongest root of all.
Saying like, if I was to tell my son about Dr. Buzzard, I could tell him the area and he
Mm-hmm.
would kind of know, but it's like, so for us, that's been the biggest thing for the ones that move away to
Mm-hmm.
try to, because what if they decide to move back home one day? They need to be familiar. You don't want them to seem like the Northerners that moved to South Carolina that don't know anything about the area. You can't say, oh, well, I have family in this area. And they're like, okay, when they start talking about something, they're like, so it's just like different things like that. Yeah.
Specifically.
So a lot of people look at it as it's not a dialect, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is a dialect, and they think it's just broken language, but it's not. Some people think it's just traditions that your family's just used to doing.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not. It actually comes from somewhere, and people that still hold it dear. I only speak about the Beaufort area. St. Helena, the islands down that way, because that's where we were exposed from the family that lives down there. And I would want them to know that it's not basically traditions of those that are impoverished, because some people think, oh, that's just the poor people down there to do that. It's not. It's actually a true culture that's still celebrated. I'm sure they probably told you about the festival that they have down there in the Beaufort area on the island, St. Helena Islands, and all of that. They
Mm-hmm.
have a festival during the don't want you to think it's for impoverished people or people that don't know. It's an actual culture, it's an actual language,
Yes.
um, and it's understood. Now, granted, I will tell people I'm from the Low Country, but there are some people when they get to talking, I have to sit down and really, incline my ear so that I can really understand
Mm-hmm.
everything that's being said, because and some of the things I still like the language, I'll find myself saying certain things to my students. And when they look at me, I'm like, first of all, Tanya, these kids are 13, 14. They don't understand. They don't, you can talk about, but over the years, like I said, saying certain things to my son, like we'll say, child, you bad off in the head. Your head bad, or something like that. And they're like, what are you talking about? And that's just my way of saying, you have crazy thoughts, silly thoughts, da 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 da. But just learning the different not learning, but trying to weave that into them. Because even though they don't know they're getting another culture, they are. So that would be my biggest thing. It's not an impoverished thing. It is an actual culture. It is an actual language.
Absolutely.
On the impoverished part, I used to, when I was growing up, and because, I was pushed to succeed in school and to do all of that, I would myself, before I knew better, would look at the older ones in my family and be like, why you gotta talk like that? And I felt it was a broken language myself until I learned and know this is your culture, this is your heritage, you should be proud of it. And like for me, getting that double-edged sword of being born in New Orleans and seeing the Geechee colored culture from the Louisiana and Mississippi side of it, and then coming to the Georgia, South Carolina side was different.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's the same in some ways, but it is different in some ways. And I was like, wow. So seeing both sides of it on both sides of my family, it's really made me appreciate. And a lot of them don't realize it even goes beyond, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, all of that, to back to other countries like Jamaica and all of that, because that's where a lot of them came from, and Africa, came from, for us, and mixed together, and then mix, and it just keeps going, so
Exactly.
it's not something that we have sole ownership of.
Yeah, your community just was forced into a situation where you had all these different ties, and then created a new community, a new language, and a new culture that is authentically American.
Yep, authentically. Yep. Yep. Well, have you learned a lot from it?
Yes. No, this has been... Where are you from?
I was originally born in New York City. However, I was reared on Wadmalaw Island, South Carolina. Wadmalaw is about 25 miles from Charleston. It is next to Charleston, James Island, Johns Island, and the last one is Wadmalaw. That's where I grew up.
Okay. And what does it mean to you to be someone of Gullah Geechee heritage?
Initially, it was embarrassing, simply because of our dialect, and we weren't the most acceptable kind of people. When I went places, people were like, yo, whether or not it seemed to be a negative. But the older I got, the more I embrace who I am and actually what it means to be from that region. And for me, everything started with my grandfather. My grandfather had a 7th grade education. However, he sent all his kids to college. Those who wanted to go up north and work. So I basically look at what he's done, and I try to compare myself to him, and I keep falling short because he was a man's man. That's what I call a man's man. I have a scale. I put God, Jesus, and then Rufus. That's my grandfather's name. Yeah. So he's on my hierarchy.
Awesome. Would you tell me about heirs property and what that means?
Heirs property. Heirs property is how we, I'll say this, generationally, how we keep the land within our family. What it is like, for example, my grandfather had certain pieces of land, and if you don't have a will, when you make a deed of it, you said Rufus. His name was Rufus Peterson, and his heirs. Heirs mean his lineage could be his kids, and then not only including his kids' kids, and so forth, so on. That way we can keep the land in the family. The only problem with that is somebody has to pay the land taxes. And when 27 people own a segment of the land, who wants to pay the taxes? So it can actually be a beautiful thing to keep the land, but it can also be extremely difficult to maintain the land. And most of these heirs properties normally have a home on there. So for us, I grew up in the house that my grandmother and grandfather first built, where my mother was born. All her siblings were born, except for my youngest aunt, who was born at a hospital. But everybody else. So I grew up in the bedroom where my uncle grew up. And so every time they would have a child, they would just add another room to the house. So if you walk through the house that I grew up in, it was more like a little maze. In order to get to my room, you have to go through my aunt's room to get to my room. So it was a unique perspective. However, the home was immaculately kept because it was what they owned. So when I grew up there with my mother, you had to keep the house clean. And we have a saying, we could talk about each other, but nobody should ever come in your house and talk about you. So in other words, you have to present an image that is to their standards. Now, to my standards, it would be a little different than my mother's standards. It would definitely be different to her mother's standards. But, and for that same reason, my mom said this to me. She said, the only thing a woman should be able to do for you is have your baby. So I can cook, clean, sew, anything that needs to be done. We were taught that you have to do it. You have to be able to. I can make a fire. We can We can, like I said, go on top of the house and make repairs. So anything that we could do, we had to know. My brother, my sister, myself, we were required because that's how you survive on the island. You have to overcome and adapt, modify and adjust. We call it, you got to do what you do. And that's what you have to do, what you do. And that's it.
Can you tell me about how you have preserved your language in your family?
Well, initially I didn't attempt to preserve my language. What happened was I married a young lady from New Jersey. And so as I moved away from South Carolina, the language kind of dissipated. However, what I didn't realize is that my dialect was being picked up by my kids. So my kids would say certain things. I'm like, no, where'd you get that from? And I didn't realize. So in actuality, I was transitioning my language from what we deemed as proper education to Gullah Geechee. We just call it Geechee. And so my kids would pick it up and they would say certain things. I'm like, I just got excited because I'm in Charleston. I grew up in Charleston County, and there is an euphoric feeling when you hear your native tongue that is hard to explain. So as I travel through the country, and you can hear it from people in Georgetown, I'm like, oh, what part of South Carolina are you from? They're like, I'm from Georgia. I said, the coastal islands of Georgia. I said, but it's all the same. What I came to realize is that my family and friends actually came from a little segment of Africa, and we had a group of individuals to go visit Sierra Leone, and Sierra Leone, our language was almost identical to theirs. So as they spoke, they could understand it. I've never visited personally. That's probably one of my to-do things, but that's So to me, preserving the language is just being naturally who you are and speaking around your family and friends. But especially when you get a group of us together, it's on and popping, because then you just relax and you be yourself, and you don't have to worry about how articulate you are or what the correct pronunciation of a word is. Just who you become.
Would you tell me again about Defusky Island?
All right. When I try to have people understand the dialect of Geechee, I use an example, Defusky Island. Defusky Island is a small island located off the coast of Beaufort, South Carolina, way down in the bottom. So when people first hear you say Defusky, they thinking, what's that, a strange word? It's actually saying the first two letters, D-E, is the. Fuss is first. Key, keys. The first set of key islands as you travel up the coast of South Carolina. So in actuality, we understood everything we were saying. It's just your ears weren't attuned to our language. So therefore, even though some people may think it's not proper, it is perfect just the way it is.